In this video I'm looking at the Mission Impossible, what is it, 5? I think we're on 5 now. Mission Impossible 5 poster, which is Rogue Nation. And I've got to say the reviews coming in look pretty good, but as far as the poster, we can have a look at that. This one is kind of a breath of fresh air when it comes to movie posters. You may notice if you've watched any of the previous videos where I look over these, they're always centered up elements, centered up text. Everything is working along the midline in the middle of the composition. This one isn't at all. It's got a Dutch angle to it, even with the text, and it's asymmetrically balanced. And it's actually one of the better compositions that you'll see in a movie poster because they're usually so conventional. It also takes kind of a gripping moment from the trailer, which I saw the trailer fairly recently. I think it was in Ant-Man. And this was definitely a highlight of that trailer as far as an action sequence, and they turned it into a poster. So I think that this one, again, is very encouraging in the world of movie posters because it has some elements of uniqueness to it, and also seems to acknowledge the film directly rather than just putting forth almost like a template movie poster. There are a few things that I would change on it, but again, I just wanted to say up front this is better than it usually is, way better. But compositionally, where we're leading the eye, there is one thing where you typically don't want to show a completely foreshortened human being. So, for example, we're looking almost straight down his body here, which makes his shoulders appear much, much wider than the rest of his body, giving him kind of a gorilla build. So oftentimes you won't see fully foreshortened human beings, just because it makes for a less than appealing figure. I understand why they did it here. Obviously you want the moment, but when it comes to a poster, usually that's not done. Alright, poster and all, illustration, design, whatever. Another thing I notice about it is it's got kind of a untreated look. Now part of me respects this because it's almost as though they took the frame directly from it, but it's kind of very cool and relaxing. Looks like kind of a cloudy day, so some enhancements to color may help with that. And then also we have this enormous empty spot up in the corner that's at a mid-tone. I feel like that's stealing too much attention simply because of its placement and size, so finding a way to diminish that would be helpful. So I went through and worked on some filters, and I'll walk through what I felt like could be changed. I just tried to think about this if it was my project. Now this is a low resolution image that I'm working from. This is it at 100%, so I don't have a lot of ability to change things. I did just broad general changes to it to see what kind of effects I could get. So the first thing I did was I went in and wanted to look at a curves layer for it. It's very bright. There doesn't seem to be much in the way of dark, shadows, anything like that. The darkest area here is kind of your focal point, but I feel like we create a better focal point regardless. So I went ahead and threw on a curves layer, and inside that curves layer I did a couple of things, one of which was just barely darkening down the shadows some. You can see that change occur there. And then another one was to go into my blue channel, and I added a little bit more blue to the shadows and then pulled down the highlights to add some yellow to it, just to begin the process of warming this up, to make it a little bit warmer. So you can see a pretty drastic difference in temperature there, even with this initial element. Now that darkens some things that don't need to be darkened, such as detail and stuff over here, so I'll deal with that here in a minute. The next thing I did was I wanted to pull out some of this blue and some of the green. And when I say pull out the blue, I put some blue in the shadows. I want to pull a little bit out of midtones and out of highlights. So I threw on a color balance layer. And inside this color balance layer between my shadows, midtones, and highlights, I tried to drop some yellow in, and I tried to pull out any green because the green was a little bit dominant. So the addition of that, you can see, really warms it up. That's the second step in my process of warming this image up and making it have a little bit more life to it. Again, if it's down to just the blue, it just feels too relaxing. This is an action sequence. So I wanted to breathe some life into it. And these changes, I want them to be subtle because I kind of respect the untreated look. I just feel like we could push it in a slightly different direction without much damage. Next thing I wanted to do was deal with this upper corner problem. So I went ahead and threw on this shadow up here. If I toggle that, you can see just pulling the eye down by darkening that up some, and then another one on top, both the top left corner and that one. Again, see, if I pull them away, you can see it feels blank now. if I put them in there, it pushes the eye down towards the figure or to the right. I'm just trying to get it out of that corner. The next thing I needed to do, again this is a side effect of this curves layer where I kind of darken things down, was to find some way to highlight this figure. So I threw on just a lightening layer set to something like overlay, and I literally just plopped it over there. It should be done in a more detailed fashion, but something to draw more attention to that figure now that I have darkened around the edges. So that's the change I made there. And the difference between the two, even with these basic layers, you can see original poster, this one. So the only thing that I would really complain about with this is the foreshortened figure and just not balancing the color in a way that suits the content of the poster. Otherwise, I really like this poster. This is one I could actually see somebody hanging on the wall. Oh, there was actually one other thing that I did, and I completely forgot about it. The red down here in the corner, I understand that's part of kind of the movie's motif, but it doesn't really suit, I don't feel anyway, it doesn't suit the color palette of either version of the poster, either mine or the original one. So I did an opposing, change it to orange, and felt like that fit a little bit better. There's an argument to be made for several different colors, but I felt like the orange drew the eye more towards the figure than the title while still keeping it readable. So those were my changes I made. Again, I think it's a good poster in general. I just wanted to show, as always, that there's a few things you can do. There's no design that's above critique.